300 men defeated an army so large. The Bible says it covered the land like a swarm of locusts. No superior weapons, no massive reinforcements, no military advantage. In fact, their army kept getting smaller. So, how did 300 men achieve what thousands could not? The story begins during a dark period in Israel's history. For 7 years, the Midianites terrorized the land. Every harvest season, they would invade. They took livestock, destroyed crops, and left entire communities struggling to survive. The Israelites were so afraid that many hid in caves and mountain strongholds. Hope was fading. Then God called an unlikely man named Gideon. At the time, Gideon wasn't a famous warrior. He wasn't a king. He wasn't even confident in himself. When an angel appeared and called him a mighty warrior, Gideon could hardly believe it. He saw himself as the weakest member of the weakest family in his tribe. But God had other plans. Gideon was told to gather an army and confront Midian. Thousands answered the call. 32,000 men assembled under his command. It seemed like a good start. But then something unexpected happened. God said the army was too large. Too large? They were already heavily outnumbered. Yet Gideon was instructed to send home anyone who was afraid. 22,000 men left immediately. Only 10,000 remained. Still, God said the army was too large. A second test followed. The men were brought to water to drink. Most knelt down. A small group remained alert, scooping water with their hands while keeping watch. When the test was over, only 300 men remained. The rest were sent home. 300 soldiers, against an enemy force so vast it seemed impossible to count. No military commander would choose those odds. But the battle was about to begin. That night, Gideon crept close to the Midianite camp. There, he overheard 2 enemy soldiers talking. One described a dream. A loaf of barley bread had rolled into the camp and knocked down a tent. The other soldier immediately interpreted it. This can only be Gideon. God has given Midian into his hand. For Gideon, it was the confirmation he needed. The battle would go forward, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of swords, each man carried a trumpet, a clay jar, and a torch hidden inside. Under cover of darkness, the 300 surrounded the enemy camp. At Gideon's signal, they shattered their jars. The night suddenly filled with light. 300 torches blazed in the darkness. Trumpets sounded from every direction. Then the men shouted, "A sword for the Lord, and for Gideon!" The Midianites awoke in complete confusion. Lights surrounded them. Trumpets echoed through the hills. Panic spread through the camp. Believing a massive army had attacked, they turned on one another. In the chaos, the enemy fled. The impossible had happened. 300 men had defeated an army that should have overwhelmed them. Not through numbers, not through superior weapons, but through a strategy nobody could have imagined. For thousands of years, Gideon's victory has remained one of the most remarkable stories in the Bible. A reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that overwhelming odds do not always determine the outcome, and that sometimes the smallest force can achieve the greatest victory. But perhaps the biggest mystery is this. Why did God reduce the army from 32,000 men to only 300? Because according to the story, the victory was never supposed to belong to the army. It was meant to point to something greater. This is divine and beyond. And some victories defy every expectation.